a little something more. I've got a plan in mind, a special thing in store. The light bulb inside my head says, get out and play, 'cause you never feel this way. It's my lucky day, it's my lucky day. It's my lucky day, my lucky day. Don't need a pot of gold, a rabbit's foot or to be told. It's my lucky day, it's my lucky day.
Hello, my friends. Happy Tuesday. I am so excited to be here with you. And I'm so excited to have my guest here. I'm trying to point. I feel like my fingers should go all the way to you. But this is Emily Crookston, and I I love Emily Crookston. She is a business ghostwriter, a developmental editor, and a thought leadership strategist. She helps fringe experts and maverick entrepreneurs get their ideas out of their heads. As the owner and decider of all things at the Pocket PhD, she and her team collaborate with clients to write short and long form content that positions them as a disruptor. Emily is also a former philosophy professor, a speaker, and a podcast guest. When she's not writing intensely, she's most likely practicing yoga intensely. She lives for coffee shops that play great music to write to and desserts topped with real whipped cream. Emily, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Amanda. Super excited to be here. This is fun.
Well, so I was so excited to talk about thought leadership. And when I thought about talking thought leadership, I was like, oh, obviously Emily needs to be the person I talk with about this, because you are, in my mind, the thought leader about thought leadership. So can you tell us where it all began? Like, where does this start for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love the thought leader, however that tagline you gave me. That's a great one. I'll have to remember. Yeah, so my story starts when I was in academia. I used to be a professor, like you mentioned in my bio. I do have a PhD. My company is the Pocket PhD, and yes, I have a PhD. And yeah, I wasn't thinking at all about thought leadership. You know, when I started my business, it was because I was trying to figure out what else I could do with my skills. And I actually just gave a talk last week about transferable skills, like how can you take a PhD in humanities and do something else with it, because that's what I've done. But yeah, I wasn't thinking about thought leadership. I was thinking, I think I like marketing. I think I can do that. And I found a marketing internship and started ghost blogging. I didn't know what it was at the time, but that's what I was doing. I was writing blogs for the person who I was interning for, and she had clients. She has a web development company, so she had a lot of clients with websites that needed blogs. And I started ghost blogging. I eventually found my way to writing longer things. Because I said, oh my gosh, if I want to make a living writing blogs for people, that's a lot of blogs to write. So I started just doing bigger projects. And so really what happened was during the pandemic, I had been getting my clients through referrals. I had been getting clients through networking. All of that went away. Obviously, we couldn't be around other people. And so I moved everything to LinkedIn. And that's really where the thought leadership part kind of starts, because I sort of figured out a system for using LinkedIn. I started getting a bunch of leads through LinkedIn. And I thought I could do this for other people. And even within the last year, I was telling Amanda before we started, I've pivoted once again, because now I see a pretty big distinction between marketing for lead generation and thought leadership for building credibility, building authority. And so we've even shifted more to say, we're not really in the business of helping you generate leads for your business. Thought leadership can generate leads, but it's really more about making you the face, or giving you authority. Maybe you want to be a keynote speaker, or you want to write a book. Let's talk about the strategy around all of that.
Yeah. And can you define for us what thought leadership is?
Yeah, I like to say that a thought leader is an expert that's learned to own their expertise. Um, so yeah, so I think that I think there are experts and there are plenty of subject matter experts who are kind of the best kept secret in their industries. And really the difference between subject matter just being a subject matter expert and not really putting your thoughts or ideas out, and becoming a thought leader. And actually, I don't love that term. We can talk about that as well. I really prefer like big idea expert. Moving from a subject matter expert to a big idea expert is really just about your confidence and sharing your ideas and how much you're willing to put yourself out there. I think a lot of experts have all this knowledge locked up in their heads, like I did as a professor, honestly. And it's very hard to go from talking to other experts all day long to sharing it with a lay audience, sharing it with non experts. And I think that's the big difference between being a subject matter expert and being a thought leader. Thought leaders put it out there, and often there's something very disruptive about what they're saying, or there's something at least innovative about what they're saying. So it's not just that you're good at what you do. You actually want to shift your industry in some ways, and that's kind of part of your strategy and what you want to do with your expertise. Mhm.
So, what is coming to mind for me as you were saying that, are the weight of these words? Thought leader
Mhm.
sounds like a big, serious thing.
Yeah,
Subject matter expert
yeah,
sounds like a big, serious thing.
yeah,
Um, but you talk about thought leadership in a way that makes it so accessible. So,
yeah,
how do we make that shift from
yeah.
thought leader to thought leadership as something maybe like a normal person like me could do?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, I talked with someone today. She's thinking about working with us, a prospect for thought leadership stuff, and she's like, I don't really care about getting my name out there. I don't really care about being published in, Harvard Business Review and that kind of thing. And what I said to her was, but she recognizes the value of thought leadership. We kind of talked about that outside of, hey, look at me, I'm so cool, I have this big ego, right? Like she clearly doesn't care about that and doesn't want that to be part of her plan. That's not part of her strategy at all. But I said, it really does help other people recognize who you are and what you do, right? In a way of increasing your visibility. And what I always tell people, this is kind of my theory. My theory is you can become a thought leader by sharing your half baked ideas. So I'm always trying to encourage people to share their ideas early before they feel ready. Because what that does is it really helps you shape those ideas. You get feedback from other people. Um, Personally, for me, my favorite thing is to brainstorm with someone else when I have a new idea. And, there's no reason why we can't do that more often, why we can't do that with our LinkedIn community, right? There's lots of opportunities for brainstorming, and it doesn't have to be, well, I can only talk to my best friend because I'm afraid if I say this out loud, someone is going to sort of, I don't know, pin it on me or something like that. But ideas aren't like that. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to say, well, I was wrong about that. I'm kind of like, even if you write a book and you put something in there that you want to take back later, you can write another book. You can take it back. Like nothing is permanent. I think we sometimes get into, and I do this too, get into our perfectionist mindsets when we're about to put any content out. And I really want to, convey to people that your book will be better if you talk about the ideas early. I mean, people are always also worried about their ideas getting scooped and things like that. And I just think those risks are very, very low. There's a lot of benefit to sharing half-baked ideas.
Yeah, and I love how fun that sounds, right? Because that just takes me to the playground and really thinking
Yeah.
of it as we can share ideas. And
Mhm,
I'm thinking back to my early days on LinkedIn, and I
mhm,
I know you know my story where I did
mhm,
not set out to start talking about journaling. I was
mhm,
just on LinkedIn because I had heard it was a place of opportunity, And I was learning and growing so much. I
Mhm.
thought, well, what can I put out into the world really to contribute to this economy of learning and growing? And I thought, well, I could probably talk about journaling for 3 or 4 days.
Right.
Maybe I can stretch it to a week because it's just journaling. Like everybody knows about journaling. And
Mhm.
I put some half-baked ideas into the world, and I have been so shocked at the trajectory it sent me on. You
Yeah.
know, when my very first LinkedIn networking call, started with, "Tell me about everything," or no, "Tell me everything about how you journal," because 'cause I've never heard anyone talk about journaling the way you do.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, well, like, I'm happy to, but, like, journaling." To me, it was like no big deal, probably,
Right.
like, to rocket scientists, it's just
Right.
science, right?
Yeah.
But, like,
Yeah.
sometimes it's so hard to value what comes easily to
Mhm.
us or what we're good
Yeah.
at, or
Yeah.
especially when we look at what other people are doing, right?
Mhm.
Other people are writing books for other people. Other
Yeah.
people are, doing these fabulous things. And,
Mhm.
I'm over here writing about journaling, right? Like,
Right.
I don't, there's a question in there somewhere, but I don't know
Yeah.
what that question is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the question is, how do I know if I have something worth sharing with the world, right? And I think that's a really valid question because the reason I don't love thought leadership as a label is because I think some people who call themselves thought leaders aren't really disrupting anything. They don't really have innovative ideas, or they're not sharing them in ways that are like, aha, like it's often like, oh, that's that everybody, really, if you've read anything online about this topic, you come across that, right? Like I could Google it and find it. Sometimes people put up a list of something, but it's not an interesting or engaging list. It's just the thing you would find if you googled the term. And calling that thought leadership is, I want to call bullshit on that. Like I don't think that's what it is. But the thing to look for, I think, is like you were saying, I got on a call and someone said, tell me everything you know about journaling. Like when people's eyes pop at the things that you're telling them, that's the thing to key in on. That's the thing that's like, oh, this is different. This is not the way people are talking about this. And I think that experience gives me personally a lot of confidence. Like, oh, I'm hitting on something that's like when I was talking earlier and you were like, ooh, what, oh, thought leader is an expert who's owns their expertise, like that. Then I'm like, that's an idea, right? That's something to play with. So that's another reason I love testing ideas out on other people, because otherwise I really think you get into your head about, oh, I don't know, everyone thinks this isn't new, this isn't mine, where did it come from? But when you start talking and you can start to see the sparkle in people's eyes, that's when it gets like, oh, I'm hitting on something. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love too how thought leadership is not confined to a particular industry or set of industries.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that. I think anybody could potentially be a thought leader in their industry. And it's really a matter of figuring out again what's innovative about what you think about it and what would be interesting. And the nice thing too is that you don't have to convince or impress the experts in your field, right? You have to convince and impress your audience, whatever that looks like and whatever you're trying to build. So, I used to say this when I was a professor, I really just have to be a week ahead of my students in class, or even a day ahead of them. I don't have to know what this trajectory of the whole class is going to look like, as long as I'm ahead of them. And the same is true in business, as long as you're ahead of your clients. And when you're working day in and day out on something, you're going to be ahead of them because they're not doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, this word disruption that you
Mm,
keep using.
mhm.
So that's another, I don't know, really you're like full of all these power words tonight, Emily. And I know these are words that are just in your
Mm,
vocabulary that you talk about and you you
Yeah.
live. I really see you do that. Um, can you define disruption for people? Because that
Yeah.
sounds really intimidating to me.
Totally. Yes. It conjures up ideas, the Silicon Valley and the startups and all of that. Yeah. And controversial too. I like to use the word controversial. And I think that that's a philosophy word. You want something controversial to say so that people will argue with you in philosophy. That's kind of the whole goal. But that can be really intimidating for a person if you're not interested in starting controversy, if you don't want to argue with people. And the same for disruption. You might think, I don't want to disrupt my field. I like my field. I want it to stick around. Disruption might sound like you're creating a whole new thing or you're trying to destroy the past. So maybe these aren't, the perfect words, and, language is tricky. But I think, what I mean by disruption or innovation or controversy is really just an angle. You want to have an angle on something, right? So there's a difference between stating the facts and explaining what you do and having an opinion about it, right? There are all kinds of things that I do, like when I'm writing and editing with a client, a particular word that they want to change. I might say, I don't have a strong opinion on that. You can change that word. That's fine. But if you want to take this paragraph, or if you want to take this chapter and change it to say X, Y, and Z, that's not going to work because that won't fit with the previous chapter, or, that's going to disrupt the flow of this whole book. So I have strong opinions about that. And that's simply all I mean by disruption, innovation, controversy, like having an opinion for good reasons, being able to explain your reasons. Because if you're going to have an opinion, if you're going to start telling a client, no, I don't think this chapter should be here, you've got to have good reasons why you're telling them that. So, anything you have that you can back up with reasons, that could be potentially disruptive. Some people are legitimately trying to disrupt their industries because they see bias, or they see that people like them are not accepted, don't have a seat at the table. And I love working with those folks. They're more trying to start a movement. But not everybody has to be in that place to be able to be a thought leader. There's definitely things you can say. Like I always, a great brainstorming exercise is to list the opinions you have about your industry. You have strong opinions about journaling. I wouldn't say you're trying to disrupt anything necessarily. In fact, you're trying to be very constructive. You're building, you're saying journaling can be done in many different ways. And here's your toolkit, here's your toolbox for journaling. Here's how I like to do it. That kind of stuff. That's really good. But you're sort of disrupting people's mindsets, I suppose, about what journaling is. And that's another great way to think of it. If you do a training within your job and you do it in a way that's different from other trainers would do it, that's something to consider as disruptive. You have opinions about how this thing should be taught.
Yeah. So why is thought leadership like why is that something is it something for us to aspire to? I'm kind of
Mhm.
feeling like it is, but like what comes along with that? Why would we want to be a thought leader?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, so I always tell people thought leadership, I think, comes further along in the sales funnel. So we like to talk in terms of sales funnels when it comes to marketing. If you're at the place where you're still trying to build your pipeline and you don't have a solid set of clients coming in the door the way that you want them to, maybe you don't quite have your head wrapped around your services, your offerings just yet. Thought leadership is it's not time. Sometimes I'll talk to people and they're like, oh, I just started my business, I'm ready to write a book. And I think, no. I say you have to be in business. And now these days I'm saying at least 5 years before you're really ready to write a book. But starting to think about what big idea you want to be known for, that can happen at any time. And you can be testing your ideas to see what's hitting with your audience, what resonates, because this is one of my big things. So many people just think writing a book is the first step. They go and they write their book and they put it out. They haven't tested their idea. They haven't asked us sometimes a single soul if this is a good idea, and that you just risk, reinventing the wheel, or, just saying things that your audience doesn't care about. And so it's a waste of time. So I think the reason you want to be a thought leader is if your head is at the point where you're thinking about, I want to be more visible. I want to reach a wider audience. I have a decent following on LinkedIn at this point. What else can I do with this? Where can I go from here? What can I build? So if it's time to start thinking about a wider audience, you want to start pitching ideas to other outlets. You sort of have your, I call them buckets or themes. You have your 3 themes, and these are the things you always talk about on LinkedIn. That's a great place to start thinking. Now, what can I do with these ideas? Can I write an article about this? And can I start pitching it? And I think then you can sort of grow your audience and build on that. So if you're thinking, oh, I want to be a keynote speaker, for example, that's a really good reason to be a thought leader. You want to start testing those ideas. You want to start getting people to recognize your name within the industry so that when you apply to conferences, they know who you are. You're not just a total outsider, because these things can get very competitive. So people want to see examples of your work and, that kind of thing. And it really does snowball. Once you get into one big place with a wider audience, it gets easier to get into others. You want to be on podcasts. If you want to start sort of going beyond your website and social media channels that you're using, that's when it's time to start thinking bigger.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is thought leadership leads to opportunities.
Yeah. There's I talk about it as a halo effect. I've worked with people to build thought leadership on LinkedIn, and what we do is we test their ideas, and then we say, oh, you're going to do, this topic. This is your topic. I don't know, introverted leadership, right? That's your topic. And so then from there, you start posting and you get more and more momentum on LinkedIn, and suddenly Yahoo Finance is reaching out to you and for an interview. And these are the kinds of examples. These are the kinds of things that happen. You start to build a relationship with editors and people who want to do interviews of you, and it just really grows. More opportunities can come from it. And it's very powerful if you want to do a keynote address to say you have a book. It's very powerful to get on a podcast if you can say, I have 10,000 followers on LinkedIn, and this is my best performing post. You can share the link for it, and it's just, it just gives people something to look at and say, oh yeah, she is an authority. She does have credibility around this topic.
I love all of that. I want to pull this comment up.
Oh
This
yeah.
is from our friend Carrie. So much to do before a book really speaks to what's going on out there and what's important.
Yes. I mean, I used to my process for ghostwriting is very quick, and I think that's a huge advantage for me. It takes 4 months to write a book. We try to get to a full draft in 8 weeks, and then we have 8 weeks to edit it, so 16 weeks total. And so I used to just dive right in with people write their books, and then I realized, oh, they're not publishing their books after they're written, or they don't have an audience at all built, and now they have a book, and now what can they do with it? So now I've started saying, no, we're going to build your platform first. We're going to test those ideas. We're going to figure out, we're going to put some articles out there and see if we can get an editor to pick them up. Because think of how much more confidence you have once you've published something on this topic. And then you can say, okay, now I'm going to do a book. I think there's just a smart way to ladder that up. And, you can start your book anytime, but I always run into people who say, oh, I've been working on this book for 10 years, and they haven't been working on it for 10 years, but they've been working on it on and off. And I think the reason for that is they haven't really tested the idea. They're not really sure that that's what they want to say. They're changing things, constantly, because they haven't given much thought to putting the ideas out in a smaller form. Because it just helps you. My friend, I was in St. Louis last week editing my friend's book, and she was talking about there are some people, in philosophy is our field, and they will do a whole symposium around their book idea. Before the book comes out, they'll just invite all these experts. They'll say, this is the book idea. They'll let them sort of tear it to shreds, and then they'll write the book. And I just can't imagine having a committee of people talking to me about my idea before I sit down and write a word. I mean, it seems like such a great a great process if you're brave enough. I mean, it's like it's a lot like the principle of building in public that startup people will talk about. I mean, that's the whole startup mantra, right? I mean, you are putting out a half-baked idea and trying to get investors to give you money. You don't know if it's going to work, and they often don't, right? They often fail. So I think we can do that with our ideas. The stakes are even lower for ideas than with a startup, it seems to me. So I love that idea of sort of building in public. With my next book, I might try something like that.
Wow. Yeah. So Carrie also says, what a cool idea, a
Yeah,
book symposium before you even
right.
write the book. And what I'm feeling now is how much bravery it takes to do this work.
Mhm.
That it's not for the faint of heart. Like
Yeah,
anytime we're going to get up in front of people,
yeah,
whether it's like actually in front of people or,
right.
on, on LinkedIn or
Yeah.
wherever, um, being able to share an idea or something that's really deep and close to our heart
Mhm.
takes a lot of bravery and vulnerability.
Yeah,
So,
it does.
what advice do you have for folks?
Yeah, this is great. I also gave a talk last week. Oh, I mentioned that the students, and this was one of the questions that came up with that because when I started my business, people ask me all the time, how did you do it? And the honest truth is there was not much thinking at all. I just sort of said, I don't like this where I'm headed. I'm done. What am I going to do next? This is the thing I'm doing. And they said, man, that takes a lot of bravery and a lot of resilience. And I don't have a lot of good answers about where that comes from. I think you can reach a point where change seems safer than staying where you are. And that's kind of where I was. And I think you can get to that point with thought leadership as well, or with your ideas as well. If you're not seeing the kind of progress that you want to be making, why not try something different? Throw some spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Our first phase of the thought leadership program that we do and build is called confident exposure. And it's simply just putting your half baked ideas out on LinkedIn, starting to outline articles, like starting to kind of come in with a broader mindset and work. Once you do that, it's like a muscle. It's like everything, right? You try it a bit and you start to get people commenting on your stuff, and it gets to be kind of addictive, right? You start building your community, start getting those folks talking in a conversation. To me, that just sparks all kinds of new ideas. And so I think the easiest way is just to like dip your toes in and look for low stakes ways to share your ideas. It could be your best friend. It could be, I want to write this thing. Let's meet weekly and talk about our progress, right? Like having that kind of accountability buddy and something like that. And then, you grow from there. You say, okay, now I'm ready for sharing with more people. Now I'm ready to do a talk. I'm ready to give a presentation, something like that. But, you have to try and look for the positive, right? It's really scary, but most of the time, the worst case scenarios aren't something to really worry about. They rarely happen. Like, I don't know, putting your ideas out, you might worry that you're going to get canceled or something like that. But most people aren't saying things that are going to get them canceled. It's you can share and you can try and see what happens and keep pushing that edge, like keep pushing that envelope and see how far it can go. It can be kind of fun if you change your mindset a little bit.
Oh, I love that so much. I wanted to say a quick hi to Tanya, who's
Hi,
joining
Tanya.
us. Thank you for joining us today, you and Carrie and everyone else who is listening. If you
Yeah.
want to drop a comment in the chat, let us know we're here, that you're here. We'd absolutely love that. Um, I wanted to ask you about room, right? Like, there's a lot of us who are doing the same thing as other people,
Mhm.
right? Like, I am not the only person talking about journaling on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. You are not the only ghostwriter on LinkedIn. Um, how do we how do we
Mm.
make sure there's room for us? How do we know there's room for us and our ideas, especially when
Mhm.
our ideas are very similar to other people's ideas?
Yeah, that's very tricky. That's very tricky. Yeah, I think I heard a quote recently. I forget who said it. It might be a Jay Akunzo quote. It was in the context of a Jay Akunzo conversation. Jay Akunzo is a marketing guy that I follow. Just started following him really, but a lot of people have told me about him. But one thing he said is, you don't have to be the best; you just have to be their favorite.
Ooh.
Which I liked, like there's a lot of room for a lot of people to do the same thing. And I'm not the best ghostwriter for every person who's looking for a ghostwriter. Amanda's not the best journaling expert for somebody who's looking for a journaling expert, right? But you just have to find your fans, the people who you are their favorite, you are the right fit for them. And I think that's the kind of thought that keeps me going when I start to go down that comparison ladder, like, oh, I'm not as good as that person. They have written bestsellers. I've never written a bestseller. What if I could say to my clients, I can write a bestseller, right? That would be amazing. But there are people who like my style. It's rebellious. It's renegade. That's part of the brand as well. And there are I just have to look for those people. I was saying the other day, I like I said in my bio, I work with fringe experts, I work with maverick entrepreneurs. I was saying to someone, I just love to work with the weirdos. Like, send me all the weirdos, like that's my brand. Those are my people. And so, I don't ever worry that I need to capitalize. I need to find everybody, absolutely everyone. I think if you're starting a small business, all you really need are like 1,000 clients, and that's not a lot. There's how many millions, billions of people on LinkedIn? I don't even know the number anymore, but I have 10,000 followers. I only need 1,000 of those people to buy from me. Like when you start to sort of shrink it down, it can become a little bit easier. If you start to have an email list of 4,000, 5,000 people, now you're suddenly in a place where it seems very realistic that you could have 1,000 people buying from you. So I used to always say, and I still believe this, I don't ever really feel competitive with other ghostwriters because we all do something so different from each other. And again, there's plenty of work to go around. Everyone needs content. That it's you find your niche and you just really lean into it. You cling to it, and you figure out the people that really gravitate towards you, and you just kind of focus on finding those people.
Yeah, I love that idea of finding your people. It reminds
Mhm.
me of this phrase my mother used to say to me starting in second grade. I'm sure you've heard me say this
Yes.
when I came home crying about the Mean Girls.
Yeah.
And she was like, Amanda, not everyone has to like you. And I think
Right.
when we can embrace the idea that not everyone has to like us, not everyone
Mhm.
has to work with us,
Mhm.
not everybody wants or needs the services that we offer,
Yeah.
right? But we can find our people, we can build beautiful communities, and I think that is my favorite part of all of it. It's just the
Yeah.
communities that we get to build by
Right.
showing up and sharing our ideas.
Right.
And a lot of the people in my community don't journal. A lot of those people will never come out and journal with me, though I wish they would. And if you are
Yeah.
listening and you're thinking, oh,
Yeah.
what can I give Amanda for her birthday? Come out and journal with me sometime. It's really, really fun.
Yeah, it is.
Um,
I love
but
it.
we need our communities, right? We need our it isn't necessarily our clients who are our biggest supporters.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's so true. My biggest supporters are often friends who send me referrals, and my clients don't always send me referrals, but I have some friends who are just so good. They just send me things all the time. And it just shows how much relationship building matters, and I just that's really comforting to me when I try to think about, building a business on volume and I need 100,000 leads or something like that. That sounds exhausting to me. But to know that I need like 12 good, strong people who will send me referrals, who, when someone talks to them and says they need a ghostwriter, they think of me. That's right. That's all I need, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the magic of relationship building. Like
Yeah.
everything good in my life has come about because of relationships.
Yeah.
And whether it's a close friend relationship or just I don't know, some other kind of relationship, our relationships
Mhm.
matter. And the way we treat people matters. And the people we have in our world matter. And I love this comment from Mari. Am I
Yeah.
saying it right? I hope I'm saying it right. Thought leaders get their best material from their own journals. I absolutely love this because so
Mhm.
much of what I share on LinkedIn started out in my journal.
Mm.
And so much of what I read on LinkedIn ends up in my journal, repurposed as my own ideas that then get shuffled around and show back up on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing what a gorgeous tool
Yes.
that is for thought leadership. So,
It's
can you
wonderful.
talk for a minute about the role journaling has played for
Mhm.
you and your own writing?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I love to journal. I wish that I had the stamina to do it more often because I often feel like there's nothing left in my tank. If I've been have a good writing day at the job, it's not going to be a good writing day for me in my journal most of the time. Um, but I do a lot of reflection even without my journal. Like I'll go for a walk and I love to walk without anything in my ears and without my phone, so I can just reflect. And there are times when I have used my journal to map out ideas. I am often sketching out, jotting down notes when ideas come to me. And the best way that I've kind of learned to use the journal, I took this expressive writing class one time, and that was a whole new field, new terminology, like brand new thing that I discovered. And I was like, whoa, this is really, I was writing and just bawling my eyes out, just like so many emotions. It really felt like a therapy session to me. And so that's when I kind of realized, like, oh, I need this. I often talk about how I think through my fingers. Like I just think better when I have a page to write on, to play with. And so, when I'm in ideation mode really, really strongly, like when I was ready to write my book, for example, I grab a piece of butcher paper and I went to town, writing ideas, circling them, creating webs of things. And that eventually became, the outline for the book. So I really find journaling as helpful in those early stages with idea generation before I can really get linear. But I can't just sit down and write an outline. I don't know anybody who can do that, but I can start brainstorming and just writing concepts as fast as my hand can scribble them, down on the page. So when I'm really sparked, that's when I like to turn to my journal for sure. As much as I
Yeah.
wish I journaled, on a regular basis, because I know those more ideas would come. I really have to have a kind of purpose around it when I sit down to do it.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense. I can't imagine, uh, how much time you spend writing. Like, how much time a day do you imagine you spend writing?
Yeah, I can really only write seriously for probably 4 hours a day, especially if I'm drafting. Editing is a different story. I could edit for 8 hours a day. That's a whole different thing. Today has been a heavy editing day because I'm meeting with a client tomorrow. But yeah, I don't have a lot of brain power for drafting and creativity that could last more than 4 hours. And often, if I have a very productive writing day, there's nothing left the next day. It's very hard. So when I do, like, when I tell people, advice about writing a book, and when I wrote my book, I tell people to try to aim for, um, what do I say, 10 hours a week? Yeah, I think 2 hours a day, 10 hours a week. So 2 hours, 5 days a week, is a really good pace that I think is pretty reasonable. And that might mean one day you have a spurt and you write for 4 hours, and the next day you don't write anything. So I like to do weekly word count goals and weekly time goals with book stuff, because I like to have that space. Because some days the words aren't coming, and it's often not helpful to just keep trying to, to bang your head against the keyboard. It just take a break, go for a walk, come back. Like you have to kind of figure out a way so that you don't get too time crunchy, because that's never good for creativity in my experience.
No,
Yeah,
absolutely not.
forcing.
So I would love to hear a little bit more about how you got into ghostwriting books specifically, and
Yeah.
specifically the type of books that you write.
Yeah. So I write business books for people. So those are thought leadership books, often how-to books. A business owner has a system that they developed and they want to put it into a book. That's a great client for me. And yeah, like I said, I was writing blog posts and I wanted to do longer things. And I just kind of put out there that I was looking to be a ghostwriter. My first client was a professional dancer in Myrtle Beach, and she had a memoir. She had her journal, her journal that she handed over to me, and I turned it into a book. So that's another good thing about journaling. If you're thinking about writing a memoir, start journaling, and make sure that you're journaling so you can remember everything you want to capture in your memoir. But since then, I prefer not to write memoirs. I like to do business books. They usually have elements of memoirs because business owners want to talk about their businesses that they've started. It often has an origin story behind it. But yeah, I've written a weight loss book. I wrote a couple of parenting books. I am working on another memoir right now because I didn't think it was going to be a memoir. Kind of snuck up on me. But I wrote a textbook. I've written a couple of textbooky type things. But yeah, it's business books. I love it because I learn so much when I do it. I have to wrap my brain around a whole industry and sometimes a whole discipline in order to write the book. But I also have that advantage of not being in the industry, which I think is a really, really good thing. If you have a thought partner like me, it helps so that your book's not too jargony or, aimed at other experts. I can say, explain it to me like I'm 5 and, let's write it like that. So,
Yeah. And I think that is so cool that you get to learn so many different things in the course of your work. I think that's amazing
yeah, I
because
love it.
all of what you learn, I'm sure, like eventually comes up somewhere else. Like
Oh yeah.
nothing that's in our brain bank is,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
in a silo.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, I always ask people, what's the business case for your book? If you're going to take time away from writing a book for your business, it needs to fit into your business strategy. You need to know how that book is going to make you money. And so I only work with people who have a clear idea of what their book's going to do for them.
Very cool. So I'm going to pull up here your website. This is
Amazing.
thepocketphd.com. Um, Can you tell us what it's like to work with you? I think we've got a little bit of a sense, but if
Yeah.
I came to you and I was like, Emily, I am ready to write my book,
Yes.
what do we do then?
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, the first question is, what's the business case for your book? We talk about that. We talk about the strategy. You would have to bring an outline to me. I expect my authors to have some kind of idea of what the big picture of the book is going to be, because otherwise it's very hard. I can't really take your ideas and turn it into a book for you. That's a little challenging. I need you to have an idea of like the structure of the book. It can
And
be a working structure. We play with it, but
and
yeah.
do I need my outline before I come to you, or we have a conversation and you say, okay, that sounds interesting. Go do your outline,
Yes.
bring it back.
Either way, a lot of my clients come with outlines, but yeah, we can work with that. We can chat about it and talk through it for sure. I just can't have you say, "Oh, like I've done this. I have all these blog posts, turn it into a book," and that it's impossible. You need a thread, you need a theme, you need some idea of what it's going to look like. From there, we get together, we meet weekly. I write for 10 or 20 hours on your book every week and show you what I've done. You review it. Sometimes my clients edit more or less. It depends on how much you want to write of the book. It's totally open. But yeah, we try to get to a full draft in 8 weeks, and then we spend 8 more weeks editing and working through the draft. And that's all assuming that you have a plan for your thought leadership, that you have built your thought leadership platform. If you don't have that, then I recommend starting, again, testing your ideas. Let's figure out what the book idea is. We'll work together and we'll help you outline it down the road, So it just depends on if you're ready for the book now or you need to build that thought leadership platform first.
Awesome. So, if you were to give one piece of advice to folks listening
Mhm.
who are thinking about thought leadership and how they can step into it,
Mhm.
what advice would you give, and what action step can people take?
Yeah. So I always say the first step is building that confidence. And the way to do that, I think, is posting on LinkedIn if you're not doing that consistently. So try to work up to posting 3 days a week. I don't think you need to do more. If you want to do more, that's great. But again, put out the half-baked ideas. So no more excuses like I don't know what to post, right? Just sit down, write a post and post it and see what happens. You can tag me. I'll come and give you some love. I'll give you some comments. But that's really the first place to start. Start putting out some half-baked ideas and try to work on getting consistent. And then eventually you can figure out like, oh, these are my top 3 ideas. I'm going to post about those. But yeah, the first step is putting yourself out there, putting out those half-baked ideas.
I love that so much. Well, Emily, thank you so much for coming, for
Yeah.
sharing your expertise. It is very clear that you love what you do, and you're so great at making it accessible. And I think that's one of the things I love most about you. Like, your posts are super empowering. This conversation felt very empowering. And I love how you took thought leadership from being this like big, intense, scary thing to like, oh, yeah, this is something that I can do.
Right. Thank you so much. That's such a great compliment. I love that. Thanks so much, Amanda. So been
You
fun.
are welcome. And my friends, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.
It's my lucky day.